I believe from the bottom of my heart, as somebody who has won elections and I've lost elections, I could deal with losing an election. But I will never sit around trying to think, oh, I got to keep you from voting because you might vote against me. If I can't win an election on my ideas, then I should get the hell out of politics. So that's what it's about.
But let me say this very emphatically. As you all know, we have never been just a campaign. We are a grassroots, multiracial, multi-generational movement which has always believed that real change never comes from the top on down, but always from the bottom on up. We have taken on Wall Street, the insurance companies, the drug companies, the fossil fuel industry, the military-industrial complex, the prison-industrial complex, and the greed of the entire corporate elite. That struggle continues. While this campaign is coming to an end, our movement is not. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us that, quote, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice, end quote. The fight for justice is what our campaign has been about. The fight for justice is what our movement remains about. Today, I congratulate Joe Biden, a very decent man, who I will work with to move our progressive ideas.
Hey guys, friendly reminder that Bernie's campaign is just ceasing funding so that way he can help people that are struggling with Corona. He's not dropping out of the race officially. He can still be voted for on the ballots in November.
You don't have to vote for Joe Biden.
Democrats, please don't make me vote for Joe Biden. Please don't make me vote for Joe Biden. Please don't make me vote for Joe Biden. I don't want to vote for Joe Biden.
I want to express to each of you my deep gratitude for helping to create an unprecedented grassroots political campaign that has had a profound impact in changing our nation. I want to thank the hundreds of thousands of volunteers who knocked on doors, millions of them, in the freezing winters of Iowa and New Hampshire, and in the heat of Nevada and in South Carolina, and in states throughout the country. I want to thank the 2 million Americans who have contributed financially to our campaign and showed the world that we can take on a corrupt campaign finance system and run a major presidential campaign without being dependent upon the wealthy and the powerful. Thank you for your 10 million contributions, averaging $18.50 a donation. I want to thank those who phone banked for our campaign and those of you who sent out millions of texts. And I want to thank the many hundreds of thousands of Americans who attended our rallies, town meetings, and house parties from New York to California. Some of these events had over 25,000 people, some had a few hundred, and some had a dozen, but all were important. And let me thank those who made these many events possible. I also want to thank our surrogates, too many to name. I can't imagine that any candidate has ever been blessed with a stronger and more dedicated group of people who have taken our message to every part of this country. And I want to thank all of those who made the music and the art an integral part of our campaign. I want to thank all of you who spoke to your friends and neighbors, posted on social media, and worked as hard as you could to make this a better country. Together, we have transformed American consciousness as to what kind of nation we can become, and have taken this country a major step forward in the never-ending struggle for economic justice, social justice, racial justice, and environmental justice. I also want to thank the many hundreds of people on our campaign staff. You were willing to move from one state to another and do all the work that had to be done. No job was too big or too small for you. You rolled up your sleeves and you did it. You embodied the words that are at the core of our movement, not me.
It's common to say now that the Sanders campaign failed. I think that's a mistake. I think it was an extraordinary success, completely shifted the arena of debate and discussion. Issues that were unthinkable a couple of years ago are now right in the middle of attention. The worst crime he committed in the eyes of the establishment is not the policies proposing. It's the fact that he was able to inspire popular movements which had already been developing, Occupy, Black Lives Matter, many others, and turn them into an activist movement which doesn't just show up every couple of years to push a lever and then go home, but applies constant pressure, constant activism, and so on. That could affect a Biden administration.
Regardless of whether you supported Bernie Sanders in the Democratic presidential primary, you cannot dispute the fact that Bernie Sanders has left an indelible mark on our country, and no doubt will continue to do so for years to come. Bernie's fearlessness and consistency, standing up for the working people of this country, is something I believe has permanently changed our country's trajectory for the better. On every major issue, on every major crisis our country is facing, whether it be climate change, our dysfunctional healthcare system, income inequality, our inequitable education system, racial injustice, or money in our politics, Bernie is a powerful voice and leader for what is right and for what is necessary. In addition, the way Bernie approaches politics is something that I believe will have lasting effect on our party and our history. His approach of not me, us is something we need more of in this country. After all, no one person can create the change we need. To bring about the solutions on the scale of the crises we face, it will take a movement of regular people standing up and fighting for the future we want. It will take people who have not been politically active getting involved in the political process. And it will take normal people standing up and running for office. Though Bernie is no longer running, I believe that those of us who are engaged in running for office, whether it be president, senator, or any other office, owe to our country to run with the same fearlessness and honesty and consistency as Bernie has. I, for one, will aim to do just that. After all, the people of Kentucky face a big battle this year. A battle between we the people and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell represents everything Bernie Sanders has been fighting against his entire public life. Big multinational companies, big pharma, corporate oligarchy, white supremacy, the gun lobby, big polluters, and DC lobbyists. To take Mitch down and replace him with someone who will serve the working class of this country will require someone to run with the courage, honesty, and integrity of Bernie Sanders. So thank you, Senator Sanders, for setting the example and making us better.
Take a look around you and find someone you don't know. Maybe somebody doesn't look kind of like you. Are you willing to fight for that person as much as you're willing to fight for yourself? If you and millions of others are prepared to do that, not only will we win this election, but together we will transform this country.
All right, to be honest, I knew this was coming since Super Tuesday. But yeah, I knew this was coming. But, thank you, Bernie, for championing these issues. Thank you for championing Medicare for All, making it big into public conversation. I think he deserves a lot of credit for his career, his entire career. And I think he's a once-in-a-lifetime politician. Now, I don't agree with them dropping out, at this point. I knew he's not going to win, but I don't agree with him dropping out before the convention. You should stay in all the way to the convention. Completely stay in. That's one thing. Number two, let's get something straight. Joe Biden is not a decent man. Joe Biden is not a decent man. Let's get that fucking straight. Joe Biden has a very credible sexual assault allegation against him, for starters. Number two, this decent man screamed on fucking Congress floor, talking about we need to, these black men are fucking dangerous and we need to protect their fucking daughters and sons and lock these motherfucking black people up. That same man that wrote the fucking crime bill that led to one of the largest mass incarcerations in human history is not a decent fucking man. The same man that has like, what, a D or an F on the Sunrise Movement climate scoreboard? That's not a decent man. A man who does not support the Green New Deal. That's not a decent man. A man who said he would veto Medicare for all. That's not a decent man. I'm not voting for that motherfucker. I'm not voting for Joe. And I mean, you can do whatever you want in your vote, but I do not encourage you to vote for Joe as well. So, I mean, if that means Trump wins again, hey, made your bed, you lie in it.
Sanders has dropped out
I
today.
did see that today.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't really drop out. He didn't really. What about his delegates? I mean, he said he's going to keep his delegates, and which is sort of interesting. He's going to keep his delegates, and he'd like to get more. Now, is he dropping out or not? That's not dropping out. When you keep your delegates and then you want more delegates before you get to the convention, that's a weird deal going on there. I don't know what's happening. And I don't know why President Obama hasn't supported Joe Biden a long time ago. There's something he feels is wrong. Why isn't he'll come out? I'm sure he's got to come out at some point, because he certainly doesn't want to see me for 4 more years. We're not. We think a little bit differently. You know what? I'll tell you. It does amaze me that President Obama hasn't supported Sleepy Joe. It just hasn't happened. When's it going to happen? When is it going to happen? Why isn't he? He knows something that you don't know. That I think I know, but you don't know. So it'll be interesting. But with Bernie, I saw his standard fare today. I watched. And I hope that a lot of Bernie Sanders people, just like they did last time, we got a tremendous percentage of Bernie people. And I think they voted for me largely because of trade, because Bernie and I agree on trade. We agree that the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country they do business with. The difference is I've done a lot about it, and I'm doing more about it. And we've made incredible trade deals, including USMCA, the deal with China, and then all of a sudden that gets disturbed by this virus situation. But China has to spend almost $250 billion on purchasing our products, $40 to $50 billion with our farmers. And the Bernie Sanders people are big believers on what I'm saying on trade, and I got a lot of them in the last election that surprised people, but it didn't surprise me. No, those are great people. They're great people. But I just, look, I'm looking at Bernie Sanders. I watched this morning, and I said, what is that all about? Like you saw that the delegates. He's not giving up his delegates. He's keeping them, and he said he wants to get more of them. And I think he's doing it to negotiate, I assume, but I don't know. That's...
Well, here's 2 things. First of all, I think Bernie's popularity among people of color is greatly underestimated by a lot of folks right now.
He lost the South by 1 million, like over 1 million votes.
I mean,
like,
we've got polls saying that he is the most popular politician in the U.S. currently, and people of color like him more than white people do. He also won the millennial.
Nonetheless, he has a problem there.
He won the vote of young people of color, which is something.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, but
and Democratic primaries might not be an accurate representation of all people of color in America.
But we're changing the topic now.
2 things. Question: why do you think that people have gotten more racist since 2008 or 2012?
Are you asking me? Definitively. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you would define more racist.
Do you have evidence for that?
Hate crimes gone up.
Like
people are getting more violent in the name of race.
I just think
the number of white supremacist groups are up. I mean, I think those are 3 pretty substantial ways of articulating it.
I just think the level.
The president of the United States is actively promoting racist memes?
Well, that's how it's expressing itself. But the raw materials, right? The sentiment.
Well, okay. I don't know if there's more racism.
I don't think.
But I think that voting for a guy who is going to, attack black people and brown people, maybe that doesn't mean I'm more racist, but I'm willing to take that step of like checking off and letting that guy do it. So I don't know what the word more racist means.
Well, here's the thing. I do not believe that the level of racism in our country or the world, because this is a worldwide phenomenon, right? I don't believe that it has changed substantially in the past decade or so. We have always been a racist country. We are still a racist country. The thing that has changed is that global capitalism is in crisis.
Well,
and the way it expresses itself.
Can I just say one thing?
Go ahead.
Bernie's out. We knew it was coming, but it's still shitty. More bad news on top of bad news. What does it mean? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It means Trump has a very good chance at re-election for a few reasons. One, with Bernie out, we're left with Joe can't form a coherent sentence Biden. Yet another corporate candidate who, on top of suffering from obvious cognitive decline, is even more uninspiring than the last one they forced down our throats. Two, Trump's blame China narrative is working. It's going to be easy for the Trump administration to spin its criminal failure to prepare for coronavirus as China's fault, because Democrats are doing the same thing, blaming China, instead of faulting the real culprits: government ineptitude, corporate greed, failure to test or lock down the country early enough, private for-profit health insurance, bailing out corporations instead of people. Sure, the Chinese spent a week in January denying the gravity of the issue, but the White House still had 2 months to prepare and instead engaged in more denial than the Chinese Communist Party. Americans are primed to point the finger at China because we're deceived by a corporate media that pumps out endless propaganda, blaming anyone but the elites responsible for this catastrophe. Plus, it has the added benefit of accelerating Cold War 3.0, which was already in motion. And 3, Trump is going to do exactly what he did in 2016, which is use the DNC's sabotage of Bernie Sanders to paint the Democratic Party as corrupt, exploiting the alienation that voters feel. He's already doing it, and the Democrats make it easy. They've spat in the face of Bernie voters over and over again while simultaneously expecting us to get in line behind their corporate candidate, just like in 2016. Democrats assume we owe them our vote just because their candidate isn't Trump, but that's not how this works. They have to try, something they seem incapable of doing as they've refused to get behind even the most modest of progressive proposals. By destroying Bernie's candidacy, the Democratic Party elite showed the same contempt for the American people that the Trump administration is showing, as it shrugs its shoulders about the deaths of tens of thousands. The Dems are digging their own grave, but they're also not fighting as Trump is sending us to our graves. Biden has been largely silent when he should be tearing Trump apart every day for literally killing us. Maybe it's time for an alternative. It's okay to be pissed. We have to be. Our lives are at stake. Given my natural inclination towards pessimism and my understanding that the Dems would sabotage Bernie at every turn, I expected this. It's also okay to be disappointed with Bernie for not fighting harder, for being a gentleman in a cutthroat game where you can take no prisoners. But it's important to remember, Bernie did change us. He changed the conversation. He built a movement for justice and equality that will hopefully outlive his campaign. So let's find solace in that and keep fighting. We need to, because things are about to get even more fucked up than they already are. So today we can be sad and angry, but tomorrow we go back to fighting for a better world. It won't be easy, it never is, but we can't let our corporate overlords win without a fight. So many people's lives depend on it.
It's such a rare thing to have a candidate that truly doesn't owe anybody except the movement.
And he's not looking to be a leader. He's looking to create an army of leaders.
We have never been just a campaign. We are a grassroots, multiracial, multi-generational movement which has always believed that real change never comes from the top on down, but always from the bottom on up. While this campaign is coming to an end, our movement is not. The fight for justice is what our campaign has been about. The fight for justice is what our movement remains about. We will change this nation, and with like-minded friends around the globe, change the entire world.
This is going to be the decade of the Green New Deal. They may say, oh, that's naive, that's impossible. We, as a society, we've operated from a place of cynicism for quite a while, and it hasn't really worked out for us. So what if for one generation, for 10 years, we try to wage a militant optimism?
Hey, my name's Miguel.
My name's Alexis Brown. Molly here. I'm out in California canvassing for Bernie.
I am here in Lawrence, Kansas with the Democratic Socialists of America.
I came out to canvass for Bernie because he understands that we need Medicare for all, tuition-free college, a Green New Deal, and a good union job for everyone in this country.
He's the only candidate in this race who's going to stand up for working people.
He's consistently stood against racism, against xenophobia. He's consistently stood up for the rights of all people, no matter what they look like, no matter what their sexual orientation is, no matter where they come from.
We see the growth of neo-fascist and ethno-nationalist movements around the world, and in this country, there's a socialist Jew from Brooklyn who advocates for things like canceling student debt, the Green New Deal, canceling medical debt, and Medicare for all. And that's fucking amazing.
So not only is Bernie the candidate we got to support, but DSA is the movement that is going to allow all these wonderful things to happen.
Bernie Sanders is definitely for the people, and I want everybody to vote for it.
And I'm gonna go out and fight for that world today with my friends and my neighbors and my coworkers and my comrades.
I will always love you how I do. I let go of.
What's up, Yang Gang? Bernie Sanders just dropped out. Trump just won 2020. Mark.
Somebody to someone, oh, I wanna be somebody to someone, oh, I never had nobody in no role.
So we found out a couple of hours ago that Bernie Sanders is officially dropping out of the race for President of the United States of America. And from talking to lots of people in Sunrise and others, people are feeling a whole range of emotions right now. And I am too. I can say, you know, I don't think there would have been a Sunrise movement without Bernie Sanders running for president in 2016. We, for the first time, saw that ideas like the fact that the climate crisis was an existential threat to humanity, and the idea that fossil fuel corporations and CEOs were actually culpable for the damage that was being done to people of color and the global South and communities right now, that these could be mainstream ideas, and Bernie Sanders showed us that way. And we, I think for the first time, saw that millions of young people were excited about politics, were excited to get involved for the first time in their lives, and we realized that there was political power on the table. We had to build a movement alongside candidates like Bernie Sanders and like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others if we wanted to win. So I'm feeling really sad that he's dropped out, but I do know that the only way to continue the legacy and to realize the bold, compassionate vision that Bernie Sanders had for America is to continue to fight. is to ensure that day in and day out, we are electing down ballot candidates to the House and the Senate and state houses that also have that bold vision of a Green New Deal, of Medicare for all, of ending mass incarceration, of ensuring that everybody in the United States has access to an affordable home. These are all concepts that Bernie supported and that we can continue and must continue to fight for. So there's a lot to do, and our job has just begun. Take the time, take a second, process, and then get out there tomorrow, because we're going to need you.
Bitches in my old phone.
We cannot maintain a president who is a pathological liar.
Now he's making up a story about getting arrested in apartheid South Africa.
This is God's truth, my word as a Biden.
It's weird.
He is a fraud.
At least 31 different lies Biden has told about being an activist in the civil rights movement.
Just flat out lie.
That's disgusting.
Trump said he would provide health care to everybody. He lied.
Joe Biden seemed very much to suggest that if Medicare for all did come to his desk, he would actually veto it.
We cannot maintain a president fostering sexism.
There was 3 corroborating witnesses for Anita Hill, and Joe Biden did not allow them to testify. She never got a direct apology from Biden.
He thinks that he's going to win by dividing us up.
The younger generation now tells me how tough things are. Give me a break. No. I have no empathy for it. Give me a break.
What we need is a new politics which brings young people into our political movement, working class people into our political movement. You cannot beat Trump with the same old kind of politics. We're going to beat Trump because this will become a contrast in ideas. One of us in this race led the opposition to the war in Iraq.
War would be a terrible mistake.
Another voted for the war in Iraq.
Hundreds of thousands now dead.
One of us has spent his entire life fighting against cuts in Social Security. Another candidate calling for cuts.
Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. I'm at every single solitary thing.
We are not going to balance the budget on the backs of the elderly, disabled vets, or the children.
You've got to put all of it on the table.
One of us led the opposition to disastrous trade agreements. Another candidate voted for disastrous trade agreements, which cost us millions of good-paying jobs. The people understand it is our campaign, our movement, which is best to defeat Trump. And this is what the choice is about.
Bernie Sanders was the only one I didn't want to pick.
Here's a friend. Bernie Sanders announced he was suspending his campaign. Bernie's always been a passionate voice for progress, and he put his heart and soul not only into running for president, but also the causes and issues he has been dedicated to his whole life. He's inspired and energized millions of supporters, especially young voters, to join him in championing a progressive vision for our country. And he didn't just run a political campaign, he created a movement. And that's a good thing for the nation and for our future. While Bernie's campaign has ended, I know his leadership is going to continue, including working to address the incredible challenges we're now facing, the ones that are facing this nation.
Nora, good evening. This chaotic Democratic campaign began with Senator Sanders on top. He even plowed ahead after a heart attack last fall. But he conceded today the coronavirus pandemic is one of the reasons he's getting out, and he was forced to make his remarks from home in Vermont alone, with no supporters by his side. Senator Bernie Sanders admitted today that his path to victory is virtually impossible.
If I believed we had a feasible path to the nomination, I would certainly continue the campaign. But it's just not there.
Sanders trails Joe Biden by more than 300 delegates, but he said he's keeping his name on the ballot in states that have yet to hold primaries, hoping to force Democrats to adopt some of his more liberal views. That could complicate things for Biden, who today thanked Sanders and appealed directly to the senator's supporters. I hope you will join us, Biden said. You are more than welcome. You're needed. Sanders had seemed unstoppable, easily winning early contests.
We won the New Hampshire primary. We won the Nevada caucus.
But just before Super Tuesday, several candidates dropped out and endorsed Biden, catching Sanders off guard. Biden has never looked back as the pandemic's freeze on the campaign stopped any chances of a Bernie rebound. Recent polls give Biden a slight edge over President Trump nationwide and in key swing states. Just minutes after Sanders' announcement, the Trump campaign released this ad.
They're more alike than you think.
Trying to tie Biden more closely to Sanders. CBS News has learned that the Biden and Sanders campaigns have actually been working together for weeks to try to figure out which of the senators' policy proposals the former vice president might be able to adopt as a way to further unify the party. A senior Biden advisor tells us we can expect more on that in the near future. Nora?
And so today, I am announcing the suspension of my campaign. Please know that I do not make this decision lightly. In fact, it has been a very difficult and painful decision. On a practical note, let me also say this. I will stay on the ballot in all remaining states and continue to gather delegates. While Vice President Biden will be the nominee, we must continue working to assemble as many delegates as possible at the Democratic Convention, where we will be able to exert significant influence over the party platform.
Hey, everybody. I just want to send a brief message to my friend Bernie Sanders, who has dedicated his life to the fight for justice, health care, and equality for all Americans. I am confident that he will continue that fight. My warmest aloha and thanks go out to Senator Sanders, to Jane, to Nina Turner, and to the entire Not Me, Us movement for your...